Hello everyone, and welcome to another RESTful web services video tutorial. In this video tutorial, we are going to enhance the Hello World service we've created in the previous tutorial. We are going to enhance this service with a path variable. Then we are going to create a user bean and a user web service. So it's going to be interesting. If you haven't watched the previous video, I suggest you to watch it because we are moving in this video from the end of the previous one. My name is Nemanja Šabačin Đakula. I'm professor at Singidunum University. This video tutorial is not for commercial purposes. This video tutorial is intended only for the students of Singidunum University. So let's get started with this. So in this video tutorial, first we want to create a path variable and to use it in the controller method. In web services, some of the variables will be passed in as the path parameter. For example, if we type like get/users/id. ID in curly braces is the parameter that the user types, so it may be translated into something like this, /users/1. Okay, so we are going to enhance our Hello World web service to return a path variable that the user passed with the URI Uniform Resource Identifier path. So here we are, I'm going to close this. So here we are in our Hello World controller class, and as you can recall from the previous video, we have here Hello World bean, very simple bean with only one property or field called message. So let's go here. Let's create another method, public. This method also returns object of type Hello World bean. The method name is the same as previous, Hello World bean. But now this method accepts one parameter. It's called name. But this is a parameter that is going to be passed as the path variable, so we must use here annotation path variable. And this method will return new Hello World bean or object with string format and text Hello World, and I'm going to use placeholder for string and with whatever parameter the user typed. For example, if the user in the URI typed parameter like Jack, this method would return Hello World Jack. And now we have to do some mappings. Again, we use a get mapping. And now as path we specify path equals. We want this path to be different from that path, so we type like let the path be hello -world -path variable / and in curly braces we supply the parameter. That's what the user types. Okay, so this is a very simple example of the path variable mappings. So let's test it out. So we just have to run our project. Okay, so in the previous video we said that the project should run in the debug mode. So we get all these details. So let's open our browser and let's go to localhost/hello/world/path/variable, and then let's apply like duck, for example. And here we see a bean in JSON representation with the message value of hello world duck. So if we put like this, there is an error because in URI we defined that we should also use this as the path variable. Let's test another one. Hello world, for example, Jane. And again we see our JSON representation of the hello world bean that was returned by our web service. Okay, so I'm going to stop this application and I'm going to go to here application.properties, and I'm going to remove this debugging because it really annoys me. Okay, so that was very simple example of the path variable. Path variable is critical for any web service because almost every web service uses some kind of path variable. In this way, one application or service interacts with the other application. For example, if we create like a client application that consumes this web service, this application in most cases will pass path variables to our web service. Now, till now we created only simple hello world resource for the REST controller to manage, and now let's create a real resource. The idea here is to create a class called user, and then we need some kind of mechanism to store the users. Since we are still not dealing with the databases and JPA technology, we are going to store the users in the simple list. So let's get started. I'm going to close all of these files except this one. So here for this purpose I'm going to create a package, and in this package I'm going to put all the files like user class, user data access layer, user controller, because I want to separate this user from this code here. I'm going to create a new package to call like users, and this package I'm going to create a user class. So this is more precisely user bean because we are using string environment. So we want to store users in production real world environments. We store users in the database, so every user should have like unique identifier ID, but as I mentioned, for this purpose we are going to store users in the list. So let's create private integer ID that would be a field that serves the purpose of unique identifier of each user. Then let's create private string name, so each user has a name, and for example private date, birth date, so every user has a birth date, for example. And of course we have to import Java util date for this to work. Okay, so let's then create a simple constructor and getters and setters, and let's just override to string method. So we're going to use a shortcut here. Go to code, generate. First we want to generate a getter, Okay, we can generate getter for all these fields. Okay, then let's generate setters again for all these fields. And here at the bottom, let's generate constructor again for all these fields. And at the very bottom, let's generate, or for example, override, okay, to string method. Okay, so now we have everything that is needed, but I'm going just to modify this to string to return like username plus this name and plus, for example, birth date DOB, like date of birth, plus this dot birth date. Okay, so this is our bean, this is our user. Okay, so if we use like MVC, model view control, we'll need a class that will be like a model class. This is a class that interacts with the data persistency layer or the database, but as I mentioned, in this case we're going to have only simple list of users in which we will store users. So let's create this class again in this same package. So right click, new Java class, and we are going to call this class like UserDAO service, data access object service. Okay, and first we are going to have you'll see why a private static variable that counts the number of users. For example, at the very beginning we're going to have only 3 users. That's why I initialize this to 3, because every user we have ID starting from 1. So now we're simulating a database environment. Okay, then I'm going to create a list, very simple list, private static list of object users, and of course I hit Alt Enter, and this list class is imported into IntelliJ. The name will be users equals, for example, new array list. Okay, as you know, list is an interface and array list is implementation of this interface. And then we want to add some users here. Of course, in production environments you will do everything programmatically, but for this purpose we're going to add users within this static block. So I'm going to create this static block, and for example to add like users.add new user, and ID is 1, then name is for example Jack, and date will be like new date. Okay, it doesn't matter, it's simplified example. See here, IntelliJ by default uses this, like it shows values and attributes. Okay, we can turn this off, but for now on let's just stay in. So users.add, let's add another user, new user, ID is 2, name like Jane, and new date again to simplify things. And finally let's add a third user, add new user like ID is 3, name is let me say like Arnold, and new date. Okay, so we've added 3 users. introduce this user count variable because later on in later examples we will be creating the users. So every time we create new user, this variable will be incremented by 1 to to remain and to make sure that each user is unique. Okay, so we want to implement simple get methods in our web service. For example, one method will print all users from this list. The second method will show information or show details about a specific user from this list. And for example, the truth method will add a new user to this list. For first two methods, so methods that print or show all information about all users in this list, and for the second method that shows details of one user in this list, we are going to use the get request, and in this example we are working with get, and then in later videos we are going to use the third method that creates a new user, and in this case we are going to use the post method, but it's for the next videos. So let's first create a method that shows details about all users from the list. So it will be like public list user. That means that this method returns this list of users. Find all, and simply this method returns this list called users. So when we execute this method, it returns this list. So nothing special about it. Then let's implement this method that we're going to use in the next videos. So it's a method that saves information or adds new user to the list using HTTP post request. So that's something what we are going to do, and let me just write this that using HTTP GET request. Okay, good. Okay, so this method will be like public user, we pass as the parameter of this method a variable user, and it returns the user that was just added to the list. So if user.getID is null, so if the user with this ID is not in the list or not in the database for some future use, then user.set ID will set ID for this new user plus user count. So we just increment this static variable here and assign this value to this user. And finally, if it executed, we go like users.add user. We finally add this new user to this list, and we return the user that was just added to the list. But here I just specify the return type. I didn't name the method, so the method name is save, or maybe we could put like save user or whatever. Okay, save user is more precise. Okay, so that's method that we are going to use in the future videos with the post request. And now let's implement the third method. It's the method that shows information about the specific user, the information, and let's say just user types in the web browser, ID of user that he or she wants to retrieve information about. Okay. Information. Okay. Okay, so let's name this method find1, like find one user, and this method will also return the user that is found. So public user find1, and as the parameter we specify ID of this user, because every user is unique using this identifier. Then let's use for each loop for user in the list of users. So if the user exists, if user get ID equals ID, we just want to return this user. Otherwise, we want to return the null, and that means that the specific user is not in the list and the specific user is not found. Okay, so for now we created a user class that is our bean that we want to retrieve, and we create this UserDAO service class that's like a model class that interacts with the database, but in this case we don't have the database and we store users in the simple list. And now we need a user controller class. That's like a REST controller class. So going here, right click, new Java class. I'm going to call this class user resource. This is going to be our REST controller class. So we put annotation REST controller, and everything is automatically imported in this. Okay, so that REST controller, we have a private instance of UserDAO service. And you see now what? We don't want to create the instance of this service, so we just created reference, as you can see. We'll use Spring for that. So Spring uses something called auto wiring. So as you can recall from the Spring videos, this class user service in this case has dependency, and dependency is UserDAO service instance, so it's dependency. We want Spring to automatically inject this dependency into this user resource instance. First we must go back to this UserDAO service, and at the beginning of this class we have to use annotation component. This annotation tells the Spring that this UserDAO service is component, so this is like dependency for some other class. So this is component. And then we go back to this user service REST controller class, and here for this instance, which is component, we just use notation auto wired. So that means that when this project is executed, the Spring will automatically inject this dependency, which is a UserDAO service instance, into this user resource class. So now we use the Spring for this. So what do we want to do in this user resource controller? First, we want to retrieve all the users from the list. Okay. So we want, for example, when the user types in the browser URL uniform resource identifier like /users, we want this user to see all users from this list, represented of course in the JSON format. For this purpose, let's create method public list user. Okay, Alt Enter. Okay, import this. Retrieve all users, and this method will simply execute this or return this. It's service dot find all. So now we have like a multi-layer approach where this method here calls the method find all from this service, and this UserDAO service class, as I mentioned many times, interacts with the database, in this case with the list. Okay, and of course we have to do some mappings here. Okay, just put get mapping, and path will be /users. But you know what? We even don't have to use this path. We just can write /users, and that's it. So when the user types in the local Tomcat localhost 80/users, this method is going to be executed. Okay, very good. So let's continue with our second method that also uses getRequest. For example, if the user types /users/id, as id is a path variable, it will get information about specific user if the user exists in this list. Okay, let's create a method for this. Public user retrieve, for example, user, and then let's specify the path variable. Path variable notation. Variable is called int id, like unique identifier, and will return service.find1, and will pass this id argument. Finally, we have to do some mappings. Get mapping, you map this to /users/id. So when a user types /users, it will get the list of all users, and when the user types /users/id of user, then it will get information about only one user that he requested. So that's basically it. We are ready to test it. And of course, this is, as all web services, used primarily for the application-to-application interaction. So we can create client application with some interface or whatsoever that communicates with this web service. We have resource, which is in this case user, and this user is exposed by this uniform resource identifier. Okay, so let's run our application and see the results. Okay, let's open browser, and for example, let's type localhost 80/users. Again, when the user issues request or application, dispatcher servlet is called, it finds appropriate controller and the method, and then returns this bean, and the bean is converted to JSON. And here we have a list of our users: first user, second user, and the third user. We can of course format these dates and so on, and for this purpose we are using regular Java core, but in this tutorial we're not dealing with Java core, so we're not going to do this. So when user types this URI, it retrieves information about all users. When the user types, for example, he wants or she wants ID of user 1, information of user with ID 1, here is Jack, ID 2, here is Jane, here is Arnold, and we get nothing, we get null for the ID 4 because the user does not exist. So it would be good if you could create a client application and play around with these things. In next video tutorials, we're going to implement the post method that creates a user resource and adds to this list. And later on, when we started using database and JPA, we will store and retrieve all users to the database, and we will retrieve the users from the database. So thank you all for attention, and thank you for watching this video. I wish you all a pleasant and nice day. See you soon. Goodbye.